Hi, welcome in. Also, Matt and Jane. Forgot to say hi to you. Welcome in. Hi, it's great to see you. Forgot where my camera was for a minute. Good. Good streams going on YouTube now too. Excellent. Good. Yeah, now I have to figure out how to make myself not look so washed out. So, okay. Is that better or worse? Not really. Hold on, let me fix this other one. Yes, I did see that you posted another video, Jane. That's probably going to be the first thing that we watch today. Yeah, that's what I need, is to have more ambient light in the room. Absolutely, Matt. You're right. Okay, let's see what happens with that. Okay, at least it's picking me up a little bit better. It's still pretty terrible. But is the problem is that the sun is right here. In a few minutes it probably won't be as bad. And when I was setting up stream 30 minutes ago, the sun was behind this wall and not washing me out so much. So I looked fine, but then it crested over, and then when the sun hits the pale flesh, psh, right? But I think that you're absolutely right. If I had some more, if there was more ambient light in the room, and splashing on, because this wall over here is a white wall that I can splash light onto, that would help, right? Because right now I have a window over here, and I did put curtains on that window, but they're not blackout curtains, right? So the little light that gets through, but if I had some light splashing from over here, then it would help balance everything out, I think. Good. Welcome in. Hi, Eleni. Good to see you. Good to see you all. Excellent. Thank you again, Jane, for always making sure that I'm not forgetting stuff. Let's see. Oh yeah, but do you stream, Matt? Or do you do something else where you're using video? Because if you stream, I would like to know about that. And I did get a monitor for the internet connectivity that monitors my upload speed and download speed. I'm still having a problem where when I put my OBS in place in Windows, what Windows does is it shows me all of OBS except for that very bottom line that has the rate of connection, and right, that shows you how many bits you're losing, and show. So for some reason, when I have it, when I have OBS over here, it's fine. When I move OBS over to here, it hides that bottom line and I can't see. But being able to keep an eye on this, my upload speed has been pretty consistent. It's been over 300 KB per second since I've begun stream. I haven't seen it drop. So hopefully that works as a good indicator now. Now I have professional quality Zoom meetings. Right, cool. Good. I still am gonna, speaking of, I'm still probably gonna keep moving my school stuff back over. I mean, this isn't a big deal for all of you, but, a big part of it really has to do with what's in the background for, right, if you all remember, the other perspective shows my closet, and hanging from the back of my closet is a kafaya, right? And that's something that I'd like to have as a mainstay, right? I have Waxing Philosophical has enough stuff that no one's going to be confused about where Waxing Philosophical stands on the issues, but I want it to be clear that Professor Waxing in the classroom is also not ashamed to advocate for Palestinians and to show my support, right? Because I think that kind of thing matters, and it's it doesn't really come up that much in the classroom, which is sometimes a little bit frustrating when there are literal wars and war crimes and genocide, and students are not interested in talking about those things in an ethics class. I mean, but I get it, because the things that they're talking about are like abortion and access to health care and other things that are also important things, but they're things that are more concerned with their own predicament. Yeah, exactly. At least they're not waning philosophical. Oh, good. So I have not had time to plan, even though. So here's what I was thinking this morning is that I would push stream back by 2 hours. That would give me 2 more hours to do schoolwork before I had to divert. That way I could get all of my schoolwork in and still have ample time to get ready for stream. And that was not the case. I spent 3 hours more than I anticipated grading school stuff. So I really just had barely enough time to get set up for stream and get everything started. So I haven't had any time to really look at the stuff that we had gone over last time, watch last stream, or to plan anything for today. But luckily, a chatter decided to put some new content in the Discord. Thank you again, Jane. So we have something, and we already had a backlog of other videos to watch in the Discord. So that's kind of what I have planned for today, is to get caught up on those videos. Of course, any conversation that pops up, we'll just see where that conversation takes us today. Rather than having a direction, we're just gonna launch and see what happens. So, right, so this is the most recent video that Jane posted in the Discord, and it's pretty short, 12 and a half minutes, and it seems like a pretty worthwhile topic here. Marxism, Leninism doesn't work. They are lying to you, and they're addressing something specific in this clip. So I want to take a look at the clip, get Anarch's take on this question, and yeah, go from there.
Arthur Kaufman says, why do you think anarchism is losing the propaganda war against Marxism, Leninism, and democratic socialism? because they are closer to society as it stands. I think that's a big part of it. So last time I was asked this question that became like a reel and everything. It's what I mentioned earlier, what I call hierarchical realism. I said that it's because of hierarchical realism, because people think that hierarchy is eternal, that it is the default state of all social structures and so on. And that's certainly part of it. But also Marxism-Leninism is basically just social democracy, to be honest.
Welcome in, Dark
It's an
Grey Otter.
insurrection
Good to
to
see
put social democracy in place, which, yeah, social democracy sounds super cool, but like, how many people in a first world capitalist nation are going to do a revolution to put social democracy in place? Not many, but enough that there is a constituency of them that divert people's energies into wasteful, dead-end vanguards that will never achieve anything. As far as like social democracy or democratic socialism, I think that one is mostly, it is just the social democratic impulse, but without the insurrectionary vibe, right? So like when you're in a capitalist nation, social democracy appears as a rational improvement upon your circumstances. And so you kind of got two options about how you're going to get it. You're either going to get it through insurrection and building a vanguard that's going to try to overturn everything, or you're going to get it through electoralism. You do parliamentary tactics, right? So it's natural when people haven't been fully radicalized, that they don't have like a really social revolutionary perspective, that they're first going to make a stop at like Marxist-Leninism and democratic socialism. Those are definitely rational first stops because they're really similar to capitalism. Quote unquote Marxism, Leninism really just puts in place what I would call state capitalism, which often just devolves into regular capitalism and at best turns into social democracy. But they have no examples of socialism. They have never achieved worker ownership of the means of production. They have never achieved decommodification. They've never achieved the abolition of the wage relation. They have no successes as far as actual revolutionary change out of capitalism goes. All they've ever done is develop capitalism. That's the only example of their praxis. However,
that sounds kind of like what we were talking about on stream, on our last stream, where we were talking about that there were different hypothetical ways that democratic socialism could be conceived of, or that could progress, but all of those hypothetical ways really aren't realistic at all. There's kind of just one. There's kind of just the one way, and I think it does reduce down to this, where it's not leading us sufficiently away from capitalism, especially if we were taking the electoral route there. We have had workers owning the product before, but not the means of production. Right. What do you mean though by anarchy existed before anarchism? I would like to see some democratic socialism on the horizon. Right. And this is what we've been talking about, Dark Grey Otter, is the when we are trying to direct ourselves towards meaningful goals. We want to make sure that we are directing ourselves towards goals that are going to ultimately get us to the utopian idea of communism, where we've abolished the state, we've abolished money, and everybody has direct access to their basic needs. And the thing that part of what we're getting caught up recently is separating out the difference between democratic socialism and social democracy, and trying to understand how those are different, if they are fundamentally different, and is one of those a better step in the right direction, or is either one or both a step in a direction that will always ultimately replicate capitalism, right? Democratic socialism is better than just capitalism, but is still not a free society. It's still not a society where people's basic needs are things that they have direct access to, that their needs are mediated by systems of, governance. The state would be what is, well, hold on. It depends on how we conceive of it. The word already existed with a negative connotation. Okay. Where it's different for liberalism and communism, which were victims of Operation Mockingbird. So there's some yes and no. So you're not wrong, Eleni, but there's some clarification that I think could be made about the history of anarchy versus anarchism. So, all right, let's, what would be the best way to think about this? The earliest anarchist parties, before there was a popular conception of anarchy. So it was a word that had a definition and a use. But anarchy in its original etymology is it means a whole lot of different kinds of things. It fits in a lot of different ways depending on the context. So the primary etymology for NRK is no order that is in order. So if we think about the word archaeology, right? This is it's been a long time since I've gone through all this. They share the same root, right? NRK. So archaeology is the mapping out of human history in order in time. That's what the word archaeology means, the study of human time through time in the order in which it is. So when we're talking about the original conception of anarchy, it does mean that there's no hierarchical order, but it also is a word that meant that there was no chronological order, or that there was a lot of different ways that it was used, and it didn't have much popular use in everyday vernacular. What I think that you were alluding to is the history of after anarchism had become a party. What had happened was there were laws passed in Russia at the time when the original anarchist parties first started to develop their philosophy. Russia, the government, the Tsar, though I'm trying to remember if this is before Nicholas II or during Nicholas II. It's been a long time since I've revisited this. But the government set about making certain kinds of activities and behaviors illegal, but there were already protections in place for established political parties. So the anarchist political party got its start because people wanted to do things which the government was calling illegal, but they didn't want to become part of the Bolsheviks or the what's the other one? Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks? That doesn't seem right. Whatever the other party was, right? There was the two primary parties in the time. So there was you have two problems working against anarchism at this time. That the government is trying to put out propaganda to demonize the anarchist movement that's a brand new thing. While the anarchist party is doing this establishing a party so that it can protect its members from being able to participate in the things that it wants to participate in, other people started to use anarchism as a cover. So what they would do is they would rob somebody, and they would claim, if they got caught robbing somebody, they would claim that they were collecting money for the anarchist party. Or they would rob a bank, and they would use, if they got caught trying to rob the bank, they would say, well, you can't put us in prison because you have this safeguard in place for established political parties. And so you have these two things going on where the government is actively trying to demonize and issue propaganda disparaging anarchists and this movement, while you have legit criminals who are just doing criminal activities who are taking on the moniker of anarchism so that they can avoid legal prosecution. Thank you. So okay, thank you. It's been a while since I've thought about any of this. So as I'm stirring around in my brain, I'm just like, is that actually right? So but TLDR, you weren't wrong, but there is some nuance there, right? That there was a conception of anarchism, but that there wasn't really a much popular conception of what the word was or any kind of political ideology associated with it. Then it became an established party, and then there was a lot of stuff that happened to make that word a bad word. Right. And I think that was your point. That was kind of a fun tangent. Let's see if I can. So I figured out what was going on with my mouse is it wasn't running out of batteries, and I thought maybe I had some program that was causing it to do a buffer thing, so it was causing the mouse to lag. That wasn't it. If I have the mouse over here, it's too far away from the dongle plugged into the computer, and so it loses connection is what was happening. I can keep it over here for a little while, but after having it over here for a while, Microslop, same. Every now and then it loses connection, but at least I've got that figured out. I've got a lot of stuff figured out. I still haven't had time to work out any of the problems with Firebot yet, but we're getting there. That'll be the next thing I do whenever I get some time. All right, so back to the video. Yeah, absolutely.
Look pretty good to you if you're living under this form of capitalism. Like, social democracy looks pretty sweet when you live under what we've got, right? So that makes it appealing. That's number one. Number two, the Marxist-Leninists have done an excellent job of presenting themselves as the pragmatists in the room. They're the pure utilitarians. Like, you need to just accept that our vanguard rule is good and is going to bring about good things, and then you'll get out of your naive, childish beliefs. But that's delusional and false. Like, it's just not backed up by historical evidence. In fact, I was arguing with somebody on Twitter the other day. They were talking about the success of all of the authoritarian leftist methods. I went and looked it up. I found a fucking list on Wikipedia of all of their self-claimed quote-unquote socialist projects and all their quote-unquote self-claimed communist projects. And I researched them, and I literally went and I counted it up. And did the statistics. They have failed 196 of 200 times, y'all. It is a vastly failed ideology, ludicrously failed ideology. It does not have a claim to practicality. It doesn't work. It usually gets destroyed. But they've done a really good job of deluding everybody into believing that it works super, super well because they point to like 3 examples.
So one of the things that I find is really interesting about the evolution of Marxist-Leninism is that it doesn't make sense dialectically. It's so departed from the works of Marx and the works of Lenin. Like, it's so detached. It is fundamentally not possible to go to war with capitalism and win against capitalism. This is something that both Marx and Lenin were very clear about. You cannot directly oppose capitalism because capitalism will always win, right? And that's not the strategy. The strategy that Marx recommended and that Lenin wrote about being a good tactic is to undermine capitalism, is to do direct action and meet people's needs so that people can see for themselves that capitalism sucks. Right? That's how it works. If you try to force people, if you try to go to war with capitalism, if you go to war against just the ideology of capitalism, that will always, always, always fail. I just don't understand why anybody who calls themselves a Marxist-Leninist would advocate for strategies that both Marx and Lenin said were not good strategies. Right? Like, when we domesticated grass. Kind of true, because capitalism doesn't have to take care of its people. Right. But on the same end, Juche socialism beats capitalism. See, but I don't know. I also don't think that Juche capitalism or Juche socialism beats capitalism. I see there being too many also internally antagonistic contradictions with because this is what I was talking about the last time we were having this conversation. It's still a form of nationalism which requires a certain kind of participation. And even if that wasn't the case, it is still a movement that is in support of an imperialist power doing empire. That's unavoidable and also undivorceable from the strategy. Now, I am not an expert on Juche. Let me just be clear, right? There's lots of literature out there, lots of stuff, and I don't know a whole lot about it. So I'm not an expert here, but from my understanding of it, the imperialism is indivorcible from the Juche philosophy. And it's also that same thing. It's trying to go to war with capitalism. It's trying to do so by undermining some of its power, but the way that it is undermining some of its power is by building power structures which are nearly identical. Right? And it has to be able to compete with that power, it does have to build power structures that are nearly identical. But what happens when it wins? Right? What we have is the same kind of system that we had before, now with a different name. We're calling money a different thing. We're calling it labor coupons, or right. We've just transitioned from one oppressive authoritarian system to a new kind of authoritarian system. North Korea isn't socialist. Right. Well, it was a hard turn, Matt. We are still on social democracy. It just popped up. Population is dropping so incredibly fast that one day, maybe soon, North Korea is going to gather some soldiers. Right, and that's empire, right? The process of annexing countries that's an imperial project that is empire. And when you are building an empire project so that you can conquer some other empire project, it's still empire. Oh, that's what that noise was. DJ Che is rating. Welcome in, DJ Che. It's great to see you. I hope you're having a great day. I hope that your stream went well. Good to see you. Between resistance with liberation in mind and resistance to usurp power. That's a good pushback, Matt, but I'm not sure that I agree that there is a big difference between resistance with liberation in mind and resistance to usurp power. What I mean is, when it comes to the material execution, what's going to be the actual difference? You still have boots on the ground. You still are going to probably engage with some form of violence. Right? What would be the difference? I get the intentions matter, right? And I'm not trying to red herring, right, away from your point, because intentions do matter, and that, I think, is the overall sentiment. But I'm not talking about the results. Well, and it's important that we keep that perspective in mind, because anything that one is doing will be perceived, right? When others are watching one's liberation, right? That's the thing. The United States says that it is liberating, right? And we don't know the intentions of people, right? All we know is what they say. And what we see when people say they are bringing liberation is they're bringing war. Right? And there isn't a distinguishable difference from what it looks like for a country to annex for the purpose of liberation or for the purpose of conquering. To all of the viewers around the globe, the two processes look identical. Right, and this, because the pushback that I would say is this is the claim that Vladimir Putin gave for Ukraine, that there were Russian citizens who were being oppressed and wanted liberation, that he was bringing liberation to those people who saw him as a liberator, right? And anybody can make those kinds of claims. And well, hold on. Wait, I am. I see. I am talking about results, not execution. Right, from a more long-term perspective, rather than it being time slice. At the time of the annexing, right, what I think you mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that after the annexation has happened and the people who are now liberated express gratitude for their liberation, right? That they have access to the means of their own freedom. They have freedom and feel liberated. Maybe is what you mean there when you say I'm talking about results, not execution. The Soviet Union was liberating Poland. They committed atrocities too. War's never good. Sometimes it's just less bad. And it takes more than one. It doesn't have to be man. It takes more than one to decide. Is, I think, a very valuable aspect. What I mean is, the more that I'm working on this freedom, liberty, rights project, the more that I'm really getting into the nuts and bolts of what liberty really means. It's not something that one can decide. And I think that's one of the greatest difficulties in conceiving freedom that people run into. Because you can't conceive of freedom divorced from plurality. Right. Okay, we'll take some time and we'll trace what I mean. There's, when we recede into the citadel of our minds, even if we are just sitting in a room by ourselves, we don't have to retreat all the way into the citadel of our mind. If we are sitting in a room all by ourselves, we are masters of the world around us. We have the power to imagine anything, that we have the freedom to do anything in that space that we would like. When we are in the company of another, their gaze upon us, their mere presence, inhibits our freedom in important ways. We no longer have the ability to manipulate everything that we see. There is now part of our world, part of our universe that is off limits to us. And this is right, how we think of this idea of freedom, right? So how do I maintain this idea of freedom in the world of others? And this is where we have most of the conversations, philosophically speaking. The history of rights discourse and the history of liberty has been about this conversation of how does this free mind maintain that freedom when they leave the citadel of their mind and enter a world of others. And the reason why we can't make sense of how that works is because that's not how it works. One is never alone in the citadel of their mind. Even as I sit in my room all by myself, and even if there weren't people watching me on Twitch, the things that are in this room, almost all of them were made by other people. The things that I have surrounding me are things that I have curated from a world of others. The identity that I have is constructed of things that I have taken from the world and made a part of my identity. At no point am I ever alone. At no point am I ever by myself. At no point am I ever an autonomous agent who is just in a vacuum, right? And I think this is why we have so much trouble thinking about freedom. Freedom exists in the world of plurality, out there. When we recede from the world of plurality where we exist, when we recede from that into the citadel of our mind, we are only making make pretend. Nothing here is meaningful anyway, right? And so the reason why we have this difficulty is because this is not where freedom begins. This is where it begins. And all of us keep trying to do this practice of receding to the abstract of the idea of freedom to figure out how we can make that real in the real world, and we never will be able to, because that's not how freedom works. Freedom is existing in a world of others, where those others respect our freedom. That's what freedom means, right? And for us to have it, others need to be participating in our freedom, period. And no one, all by themselves, retreating into the citadel of their mind, no one can have a conception of what freedom is or what freedom means. Because freedom must be negotiated in a world of others. Some people's, there's a whole lot of stuff. Let me, I didn't realize I'd let it go so long. Let me go back up. Welcome in, first time chatter. Good to see you. Greetings. Soviet Union was we already read that. You individual can't, but you collective can. Yes, 100%, Jane. Some people's freedom need to be able to oppress others to be free. And that can't be the case, Eleni. That creates a paradox. If what one believes one needs to have freedom is to oppress others, then this one is delusioned about what free is. Simply. Because you cannot secure a freedom by taking away the liberties of others. Then what you're doing is earning yourself a privilege by disadvantaging others. And maybe I'll talk a little bit more about that too. Nudity is freedom, but what about other people's freedom not to see you nude? Right, and that's right. That's going into it requires others, right? What we are free to do, right? Because you can. You can go around nude, completely free, and not violate anybody's freedoms. But that presupposes that you are in a plurality of others that don't care about that, and those places do exist, right? You can go to places where there are lots of other people who want to do the same thing and don't mind if you do along with them, right? You can have freedom in that way, but that freedom, right, Eleni, that freedom requires the others for that freedom to be real. Good. How to maximize your ownness while respecting the ownness of others is the imperative. I believe I agree with that. I'm not sure what you mean, though, by ownness. I have some suspicions. I believe I have some ideas about what you might mean, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. So you could probably clarify better than I. So what was the thing that I was thinking about? Oh, right. So, let's talk about the paradox, the paradox of, I mean, think for just a moment about how I want to approach this. So, the right to autonomy is probably the best way to illustrate this. Freedom of autonomy is the right to be able to make your own decisions, right? To choose for yourself, and to not have decisions made for you on your behalf. That's what autonomy is. There's no mechanism or method by which you can achieve more or greater autonomy. Now, there are ways by which you might restrict your own autonomy, or ways in which your autonomy might be restricted by the plurality in which you live. Nudity is a good example, right? The example I give is that you have the freedom to leave your house naked. You have the freedom. You can just do that. You don't. And the reason why you don't is because you live in a world of others, and those others have an expectation, and that's when you go out, you are clothed, right? And you honor that expectation that others have, and you interfere with your own autonomy by not leaving the house naked. Right, so you can in no way inflate autonomy. You can't get more of it. And you certainly can't get more of it by restricting the autonomy of others, because that's not the way that rights work. You have a maximum capacity for it, and everybody else has a maximum capacity. And in as much as one's autonomy is diminished, by that same way, everybody else is diminished too, right? So the example that I'll give about this is that there are variations on leaving the house somewhat unclothed, right? If you are born assigned male at birth and you have a penis, you can walk around with no shirt on, right? And all of the men's autonomy is not restricted at all in this regard. But there is a different societal expectation for women, right? And that interferes with everybody's autonomy in the same way, equally at the same time, right? So there's a gender difference which gives us a hierarchy which is established in the societal expectations. But the way that the freedom of autonomy is interfered with, it's interfered with equally across the board in the cases of actual rights, right? One onus is the degree of which an agent to apprehend and interact their environment is the degree. Okay. Right. Okay. Okay. Onus is one's ability to execute one's will without interference. Agent to apprehend and interact with their environment. Right, to make their will manifest, I think is right. And I do want to tap into this. What's the opposite of freedom? Because there's a lot of really good value to going that direction, Dark Ray Arter. I'm not ignoring you. It's just that I was trying to finish my other point, and I think I trailed off with that. I don't think I actually got that point across the way I wanted it to. Okay, totalitarian state in which you are less than a state and you are expected to do your predetermined part by the state. And that's what you mean is the opposite of freedom. I think that there's a mistake there, Mr. Sidious, in assuming that lack of freedom is always necessarily associated with the state, because there are other kinds of lacks of freedom, and there are ways that the state actually increases our freedoms in some capacity. So, and that'll take some unpacking. It's coming from an anarchist, right? It's really pretty rare that an anarchist is going to say, sometimes the state can give you more freedom, but that is literally the case. But that'll need some unpacking. People are so conditioned that they don't even want to be naked in their own home. That's true, actually. I think that is true. Even single other person already restricts freedom in some other way. Yeah, yes, right. Dark Ray Outer, your response is exactly right. Onus is the idea that Jane is trying to get across, Eleni, I think is a little bit more complicated than oneness is just the self. But of course that depends on what you mean by self, too. There's lots of different ways that we can conceive of that. Because there are, to some degree, we could say that the self, hold on. That's a tangent that's going to take us a whole ass different direction. Onus is the degree in which an agent is able to apprehend and interact their environment related to the agent. Right. So again, their capacity to make actual what their will deems, what they will, the capacity to make actual what one wills. And to have a will which is also unobstructed. Within a space to be able to interact with objects. Okay, so your conception of self that you're using here is a little uncommon, but it's the phenomenal arc of the self. Let me type this in chat. From phenomenology. So the way that phenomenology envisions the self is that the self isn't contained to the body. The self projects out in space and in time, right? Because some of your conscious self is aware of what you did yesterday and what you've done last week and the other things that you've been doing, right, to lead up, right? So some of yourself is kind of in the past. Some of yourself is actually forward in the future, planning out what you're going to do tomorrow and next week and next month. And some of yourself is involved in sitting there in it wherever it is, the physical space that you're in. But your phenomenal arc also extends out to here you are in the chat, influencing the material world in very real material ways, right, from a completely different part of the world. This is all part of your phenomenal arc and all a part of your phenomenal self, because the self is inseparable from our phenomenal arc out to the world. This is the phenomenal arc is the ego reaching out to apprehend the world. And there's a dialectic process when you reach out to apprehend, the world informs, right? And makes and gives and, so there's a reciprocal relationship in that. In which case, yes, that is exactly the kind of thing that Jane is talking about. But that's a kind of uncommon way to think about the self. So that's what threw me off and why I asked for the clarification. Because that's good. Fascism requires the need to control the body, which is why I use self in such a way. Right. Because this also ties in. Last stream I was talking about the space that we are in like mental health and the self-help gurus are about clean your room, and that there is actually a real relationship there. When you do things to make the space around you better, that's a way to signal to yourself that you are worthwhile. So this same kind of relationship plays into necropolitics. The way that the world is structured in a systematic choosing of winners and losers. Part of the necropolitical world in which we live, there are aspects of our physical space, the way that our business centers are laid out, the way that our cities and our streets are organized, part of this actually contributes to how we understand the world and how we understand ourselves. And it's a little bit of a leap, but it's really not. It's the thing. That there are ways that you can coerce mental states, and you can coerce certain kinds of mental states simply by arranging the stuff in somebody's environment. And by the stuff, I also not mean just the physical things, but stuff as in like the news and the institutions that run our lives and the government, right? All of these things are part of our environment that inform us and inform how we understand the world. So there's definitely some ties there. Yeah. So let me back up a little bit and go back and address more. And I want to get back to the videos. We've already been talking about this video for an hour. It's a 12-minute video that I'm only 4 minutes into. But Dark Gray Otter asks, what is opposite of freedom? And the reason why I was kind of putting that off is because it's a whole ass conversation in itself. So there isn't a single dialectical opposite to freedom. There's not one single, and part of this has to do with that there's many ways to be free. The easiest way to answer this actually would be to pull up a PowerPoint. Professor's going to pull up the PowerPoint. So PowerPoint lecture. And we want rights, liberty, and authority. Can be. Yes, Eleni, that can be an opposite. Actually, I think it'll work better if I just do it that way. So, but we have to be, we'll have to unpack the idea of slavery too. I know what I'm doing, I promise. Is that what I'm looking for? No, that's what I'm looking for. All right, so let's move them. Hey, rights, liberty, and authority. Right. It's not quite perfect. Y'all, irritates me. Yes. There are many contexts, and that's what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up this. So there's a lot of this that we're just going to skim right over. This is where I wanted to go. Yeah, right. So, we have two different conceptions of liberty. Yeah. We have two okay. We have two conceptions of liberty. I almost said two competing conceptions of liberty, because sometimes these conceptions of liberty are in competition with each other. Sometimes these conceptions of liberty have to work together in order for us to have rights and freedom. Sometimes it's one or the other. Right, so there's some complexity here. Rights, it can be argued, are understood as freedom to do what one desires and to not be interfered with. I am said to be free to the degree to which no human being interferes with my activity. So, to the degree that no other interferes, right? So, interference is going to be a large category which makes up a large part of the antithesis to freedom. Another way to think about rights is to be free from coercion, to be the sole author of our actions and motivations. I wish my life and my decisions to depend on myself and not on external forces of whatever kind. So, to not be interfered with, to not be subject to external forces. So that kind of gives us the answer, right? So the antithesis of freedom or liberty would be to be interfered with or to be subject to some external force. But like if you are hurting people, you will be stopped. Not sure what that's in context to. Not sure I get what you mean. Agree with this. The second definition. Well, so that's not uncommon, Mr. Sidious, that people agree with one or the other, right? So this leads us to two sometimes competing conceptions of liberty. But okay, so what it's in reference to is what, like if you are hurting people, you will be stopped. Also, both of these conceptions make that mistake that I was talking about earlier, where we presuppose the self is a free decision maker, and then when we enter into the world of others, then we find ourselves to be unfree. That's an implied premise for both of these conceptions of liberty, and I believe that groundwork is a mistake in itself. So that's also right. Freedom in by this definition is broad. This is the most broad definition of freedom. Actually, that's what I'm going for with this particular slide. This one narrows things some, right? This is extremely broad, and this is the account given by Isaiah Berlin. For those who are curious, two conceptions of liberty. I can't remember if he says liberty or freedom in the title. That's Isaiah Berlin that gives that's the broadest conception of freedom, right, that we get from Isaiah Berlin. This narrows it down a little bit. Negative liberty, which corresponds to this first conception. Negative liberty, government laws should recognize natural rights of non-interference. A negative view will generally be in opposition to any government or state interference in personal life. And something that we've talked about before, a negative conception of liberty also necessarily assumes an antagonistic relationship between an individual and the state in which they find themselves. That is an underlying concept for negative liberty. That when we inflate the rights of the state, it does the individual harm. And this is where we get liberalism, right? When we inflate the power or the authority or the extension of the state, we interfere with the rights of the individual. It's like how I was talking about how teachers learn from their students. And some teachers see them as a, oh, right. Oh, okay. As some teachers see them as a provider of knowledge separate from the students rather than being in a dialectical relationship with the students. Okay, yeah. Oh, that's what you're talking about with the, okay. Means of production will have a supply shortage that will affect you. Okay, now I get what you're saying. Okay, so let's address the impossible. Right, good. Right. So what I want to specifically focus on right here is where Elaney was talking about it's impossible. Because I think that what you're talking about is I wish my life and my decisions to depend on myself and not on external forces whatsoever. Right. This is impossible. Right. And what's going to be really hard about this is that you are right. But also I don't even know how to get there. Hold on. Just give me a minute. Okay, right. So I didn't read this other part. I didn't read this other part, right? And I think that this'll help, right? The second asks, to what am I necessarily subject? And by what authority am I to be subject, right? So when you're talking about them being the means of production may have a supply shortage that will affect you, right? That's something to which they are necessarily subject. This goes into the freedom and autonomy difference, right? You have the autonomy to will yourself to fly. You don't have the freedom to will yourself to fly because you live in a world and your living being requires a body, and that body has mass, which is attracted to the mass of the massive planet on which you live, right? And this is a necessary part of your existence to which you are necessarily subject. You must consume calories or you will perish, right? That is a necessary condition to which you are necessarily subject. So this second question is asking, okay, well, what else? What are the other things that can obstruct? Oh, I hate when I do that. Yeah, to what extent must I be subject to something else? And if I must be subject to something else, by what authority, right? If we're talking about the laws of gravity, if we're talking about the laws of metabolism, that's the authority. But if we are talking about not leaving the house without your clothes on, that's a different kind of authority. That's an authority that is established, built upon biopower, right? That is a law, for lack of a better word, about the way that the world is that we have invented, that we that we posit is a thing that ought to be a thing, that we ought not to leave our houses naked all of the time. Right? And then this second perspective asks, then by what authority does society have to tell me what to do? By what authority does the state have to to incarcerate me, to do violence to me, right? And that's what this second question is concerned with here. There's always obstructions. Doesn't mean we shouldn't strive toward a close system to the definitions as possible. Right, but we also don't want to be deluded by ideology. We want to make sure that the ends to which we are directed are grounded in material reality. You're not wrong, Mr. Sidious, but a little bit of light pushback there. I think freedom is you can be parts free, but never fully free. None of us can ever be fully free because we have physical limitations in right, but that may not be what you mean. If it is another person, so basically freedom ends when you interact with others, and that's so this is that's the thing that I think is the wrong way to think about rights. So yes, you are correct. The long-standing thousands of, actually it's only been hundreds of years of philosophical tradition that has been dedicated to understanding rights, right, is that, right? So basically freedom ends when you interact with others. And I believe that is mistaken, right? But that's, I'm calling Immanuel Kant wrong, not you, right? Because this agrees with what Immanuel Kant would say. This agrees with what Jean-Jacques Rousseau would say. This agrees with what Proudhon would say, right? So, you're not wrong in the context of classical philosophy. I believe that mindset is mistaken, because freedom doesn't begin here in the citadel of the mind and end when we enter into the world of others. Freedom exists in the world of others. That's the only place that freedom can really actually exist. Same rules you've set up for yourself. If you don't need to interact with others, why should others be affected by what you do? No worries. Right, well, and that's the way that I've set up these slides too is you, the student, right? When I'm presenting these slides to my student, what I want is for my students to have knee-jerk reactions. What I want is for my students to be hit with the information and then to and to react in that kind of way, right? That's exactly what the slideshow is supposed to do. What extent does it exist? And that's the question, right? That's what we're trying to get to here. But Dark Ray Otter, does that did I kind of answer the question? What's the opposite of freedom to your satisfaction? Freedom is the severity and extent in which any agent is able to enact power. Freedom is the... It'll be anarchy. Thanks for the follow. Severity and extent. I do like that definition of freedom. Right, and so what I was thinking is that the conception that you've offered doesn't include non-interference. But one of the things that I think is really kind of silly is that that should be necessarily implied. Right? The structure that you've given doesn't specifically, explicitly say anything about non-interference, but the severity and extent to which an agent is able to enact power is presuming that they are at present unmolested, uninterfered with, unabraded, right? That maybe. And I don't know. Can I ask a question about LandBack? Yeah. Say that land was originally occupied by people A and then taken over by Group B, and then Group A takes their land back. Would that be ideal? Right. No, that would not be ideal. No. If there are people who are living on that land right now, there is going to be some kind of conflict. First-time chatter. If you're trying to bait me into some kind of Israel is doing a good thing, then you can fuck right off. No, I mean it was A's land. No, not if they're not occupying it. If they were occupying it and then left to go live somewhere else, right? No. Right? Because other people now occupy that land and need that land to live. But nice try. All right. Well, anyways, I'd say that freedom begins when you start interacting with your environment. Yes, I believe freedom begins when you leave the citadel of your mind and begin to do things in the world, and you do those things in a way that you are uninterfered with. So what about the U.S.? Americans need that land to live. Right. But if we give the land back to the indigenous people who have a sovereign right to that land, we don't have any reason to assume that they're going to make us leave, right? That they're going to take that land from us. So yet again, there's no real paradox there. The U.S. doesn't need this land to be polluted, right? Which is what we're doing with it. If we gave the land back to indigenous, they would be responsible stewards of it who would be interested in no longer polluting the land, which would probably be better for everyone. Okay. I'm done answering your questions that are completely off topic and in no way relevant to the thing that we're talking about. So, if either get on board with the thing that everybody else in the whole stream is talking about, or go somewhere else. Please. Oh, Eleni, you're fine. You don't have to apologize to anyone. You're fine, Eleni. You're not doing anything wrong. I mean, you're a lot more free in your own home, according to libertarians, but like once you leave your house, you are in more imminent danger. You're always in danger, but the real world is much more dangerous. And see, I think that that's a mistake, right? To believe that, and that's the thing. The assumption here is that when you are with others, those others will want to do harm to you, will want to violate you. And that's one of the things that I think is, must be kind of cooked into this, is the assumption that others always want to do me harm. Right? And that I need to have freedom, and the reason why I need to have freedom is that because others always want to do me harm. But and that probably comes from a world where society is literally trying to grind you into dust. So maybe that psychological foundation is not so surprising in a society that is literally trying to grind us to dust and make us compete with each other for our own lives. In Squid Games is that's the real life of capitalism. So the most generalized opposite of freedom, limitation, constraints. In my mind, I went to physics. And I liked your example of calories and not being able to fly. There is a thing in mechanics called degrees of freedom, basically how stuff can move. Right, degrees of freedom. What a great way to think about it, because there are laws, right? There are rules and laws about the movements of objects through space. And those rules and laws don't restrict. They are that by which one is free. And another good way to express this, good Dark Ray Otter. Another way that it's explained, and I'm getting this from Isaiah Berlin too, so credit where credit's due. Music. When a musician first picks up their instrument, they have to figure out where the notes are and the time signatures, and there's a lot of learning that they have to do in order to be able to play the instrument competently. Once they reach a level of adeptness, they don't need a sheet of music to play along to. They know how to play. Right? And they can play along to the same song that other people are playing, but they are free to play how they would like to play, right? They utilize the rules and the laws of music in order to play along with everybody else freely. Right, and their participation in the song is freedom, right? That they express with the others in the world of others, right? The physical manifestation of it. All land should be owned by all people, right? Or we should not have borders, right? Is the way that I would conceive of it, but that works too, right? It's 6 to 1, half dozen of the other. Tomato. It's a mistake, but especially for a woman or trans person. What's a mistake? You don't need to introduce humans or the state, but if you do, people can impose self-limits, self-restraints. Rights given by the state are kind of this on a national level. State promises to self-limit its control. Right, so, yeah, good. If you do this, you can impose self-limits, self-restraints. Rights given by the state are kind of this on a national level. I thought you meant one thing, but now let me reread and make sure I'm getting you the right way. Because you're still talking about the physics example, and you don't need to introduce humans or the state. But if you do, people can impose self-limits, self-restraint, rights. Now I understand. Rights given by the state are kind of like this on a national level. Right. Yes. So thank you, Jane. I do need to go back to the video. But one more thing to work out here, because I made the statement earlier that sometimes a state can offer you a greater degree of freedom. And so when we think about the first time that I've done this on in class, But for my class yesterday, I began talking about what did I start with? Let me pull up my class notes. Got all kinds of things going on today, but that's okay. We'll get back to the video in a minute again. Thank you, Jane. No, that's not the right thing. Right. Okay. So, the idea is that the world is trying to hurt you, right? Makes more sense for minorities, right? Right. No, and that's I don't disagree with that mindset. And it's, at first I was like, well, why does everybody always have this assumption? But then I forgot we live in a world that's trying to kill everyone. Especially disabled people, minorities. Yeah, absolutely right. No, absolutely. You don't need to be quiet, Elena. You're fine. Okay. Right. So, no, right. This thing that was okay. So, freedom. When we think about when the government does stuff, if they implement laws, or no, here's the example that I started with. So in this slideshow, actually, let me do that. In this slideshow, that would be a good way to do it. I talk about different philosophers and their critiques of different kinds of rights. So here, John Hospers is talking about taxes. One's taxes being taken away. Opera lovers often say the state should subsidize opera so that we can all see it. They are advocating for nothing less than legalized plunder. Right. And this is something that students have no problem understanding. That they're when we're talking about an authority, some authority deciding on everybody's behalf what's good, what's in the best interests of society, what should we be spending our tax money on, right? When you point to this example, students get the idea that John Hospers is trying to talk about, that there's an individual who wants to be concerned for their own self-interest, and a society with which there's an antagonism, right? A necessary antagonism between the society and the individual who doesn't want to have to pay for everybody else's operas. But what if what's in question isn't opera, but SNAP benefits, or Section 8 housing, or right, subsidizing Meals on Wheels so that your grandmother can get fed, right? What if those are the things that we're talking about? Are those impositions that the society is imposing on the individual, or are those empowering and liberating individuals within that culture and society, right? In healthcare, exactly. If we are asking different questions, and Hospers clearly is trying to load this one direction or the other, right? Of course, the state shouldn't be stealing money from my paycheck to pay for operas. The pearl clutching, but I do want the state to pay for roads and water sanitation and fire stations, and health care would fucking be nice, right? And when we conceive of laws in this kind of way as not the individual, antagonism with the society, if we see laws as a way that society can protect and help the individual, right? In that instance, the state gives us freedom, right? Gives us more freedom than not having a state with no laws. Of course, I've loaded that too, because we would be freer without the state, period, right? In a free association of organization of our own making. But that's an aside. Right. Yeah, I think that that's probably true. As long as money is something that's necessary for the function of society, taxes will also be necessary. But I don't think that money is always necessary for the function of society. So we could do without that. Yeah, in a world, and that's the thing, in a world where people's rights, the things that people need to live, when those things are behind a paywall, right, we don't have freedom. And that we have to pay taxes really, in my opinion, doesn't matter, right? We have a state of not freedom. And that I have to pay taxes doesn't really change that I am in a state of unfreedom where my basic needs are behind a paywall, right? Only that the taxes I pay interfere a little bit with, but the evil is that my basic needs are behind the paywall. That's the thing that I'm most concerned with there. Where'd my video go? Why is it not, oh, I had to close it out to show the other thing. Good.
Okay, they tried it like 200 times, and they failed 196 times, and they're convincing you that because 5 times they survived, that means they're the practical ones. Oh, they've got it all figured out because they rolled the dice and 95% of the time failed. And that is just pure propaganda. There's just tons of examples that they can point to, but the vast majority of them got destroyed either by imperialism, capitalist pressure, or internal degradation due to hierarchy producing more and more capitalist incentives internally, or degradation due to ethnic and civil strife. Those systems aren't more stable. They are absolutely lying to people. And it's on us for not calling them the fuck out. People haven't gone and tried to figure out the facts. People haven't studied the history of their projects. And so somehow this fucking movement that is 95% failure rate, even though it's had more attempts than any other method by far, somehow has presented itself as being more practical, more utilitarian, more effective. Utterly false, and we have allowed them to get away with this lie. And don't get me wrong, maybe all of them aren't lying. Maybe they're just, unfortunately, on accident kind of deceiving people. But the fact of the matter is that there is no factuality to Marxism, Leninism being an effective utilitarian praxis. It is, in fact, a deeply failed praxis that has had way more attempts than everything else. And because it has had so many attempts, it appears as if it is very effective. So this is the same thing with cooperatives. I get into arguments between people who are like capitalists, and I talk to them about workers' cooperatives. Okay, so what they say is like, well, if workers' cooperatives are so damn good, why don't they compete in the market? Why isn't everything workers' cooperatives? Well, at one point I wasn't really sure as to, like how to answer that, you might say. I wasn't sure how to approach that question. Well, I went and I did research. And a woman named Virginia Periton published an academic article where she compared the failure rates of cooperatives, workers' cooperatives, versus corporations, like traditional corporations. And what she found was workers' cooperatives actually had a higher productivity than typical corporations. And so you might be saying, well, then why are people presenting cooperatives like there's some weird niche solution? Because for every one cooperative, this is not an exact number right here, by the way, but like for every one cooperative, there's like 100 corporations that get started. So then it looks like workers' cooperatives don't work. No, workers' cooperatives work perfectly fine. There's just less of them being created. There's a lower birth rate. And I argue that's the exact same thing when it comes to horizontal revolution. There's just a lower birth rate of horizontal revolutions.
Right, and I think that there's probably some self-fulfilling prophecy there, right? The assumption that those kind of tactics won't work.
Slave masters posing on your dollar. Get it? Look at all these slave masters posing on your dollar. Get it? Look at all these slave masters posing on your dollar. Get it? Look at all these slave masters posing on your dollar. Get it? Look at all these slave masters.
But you know what I mean? It seems like there might be a self-fulfilling prophecy there where people are not willing to put the risk in, right? Not willing to put their own skin on the line because there's this perceived failure. There's this perceived idea that they don't work as well or they're not as successful. But this is a myth that I had a professor dispel for me in the OOs, in the aughts. Right, that some of the most successful companies of all time were flat structured. So the example that my instructor gave was the rail system in across Europe used to be owned by 3 or 4 different companies, and all of those companies were all flat structured companies. And for like 200 years, it was run profitably and efficiently, and it was one of the fastest growing companies. It spread railway all across Europe, and the success of that rail system is the story of flat structures working together to organize, to make themselves a bigger thing, and then carrying that on in perpetuity. At some point, they were consolidated and all bought by a corporation, but flat tax. Yeah, capitalism will always target collectives. Lose money on purpose for a decade to run you out of business. Absolutely. Yep. Oh, and I wanted to read this too. Right. No money is the constraint. Having money means freedom, and at least in some aspects. And this is unfortunately too true in the United States. But I want to start pushing against this idea, because you're not wrong, Dark Ray Arter. I'm not disagreeing with you, but we all need to do a better job of thinking about freedom in other kinds of ways, right? If you can grow your own tomatoes, my tomatoes are just off screen over here. If you can grow your own tomatoes, right, or any of your own food, that is a little bit of freedom that you get from that monetary dependence. If you can find a living situation where you don't have to pay rent, that's a little freedom, right? And it's not having money or not having money, it's not having to pay money, right? And that's a different kind of freedom, because when it comes to what humans can accomplish, biopower is amazingly powerful and doesn't require funding. People just like to do things that are good and helpful and constructive, right? People will invent video games and still design video games even when they're not paid by some 5-star developer company, right? People will just do that because they like to do those kinds of things. And that's But for people to be able to do that, they need to have some kind of freedom. And for a lot of people in a lot of situations, the only freedom that they do have access to is having a little bit more money so that they can buy more food or that they can afford the things that they need to live, right? And that is a reality. I'm not trying to contend with that, because that's capitalism, baby. That's the system that we live in. But it would be more helpful for us to instead of thinking about freedom being tied to money, freedom being something that doesn't require money, fundamentally, right? That freedom requires money is a big part of that problem, right? And I think that's what you were speaking to specifically, which is good. Yeah, of course. Of course, it was a flat structure. Trains have a hard time pulling uphill. Forbes has become a credible source. Wow. Or GTA 6. Good. Back to the video.
They work better. They make faster progress towards socialism. There are examples, by contrast to what I said earlier, there are examples of horizontal revolutions getting abolition of wage labor. That did happen from time to time. For example, in the countryside in the Spanish Civil War. We do have examples of decommodification. Once again, the Spanish countrysides in the Spanish Civil War, but also in the Zapatistas. They've decommodified the land, for example. You know, worker ownership of the means of production is the norm in horizontal revolutionary projects. And that should, one would think, be excellent evidence that the horizontal revolutionary method is a superior revolutionary method. But unfortunately, because Marxism-Leninism tried 100 times as many times, their like tiny handful of survivals appears as if it's evidence for their success. So that's the answer to your question, in my opinion. Zahiril Adzim says, how many anarchist countries are there in the world right now? Let's hear it. That's the thing, is you are trying to compare what an anarchist considers success with what an authoritarian considers success. What an authoritarian leftist considers success is creating a capitalist state. Okay, so obviously if you want to create a capitalist state, there's tons of examples of creating a capitalist state. Authoritarian leftism is super good at that, super good at creating capitalism and painting it red. But what anarchists, or horizontalists, I guess you would say, believe is a success is when the people are empowered. So we have different metrics. I actually want revolution. Authoritarian leftists just want red capitalism. So obviously, if all you want is red capitalism, that's a lot easier. I don't know why you're calling yourself a revolutionary. I don't know why you claim to care about socialism or communism if that's the case. But that's all you've got to your name. Capitalism. You have made zero progress towards the revolutionary goal. The workers are not empowered. The workers are domineered by state apparatus and, over time, corporations as well. Scotty Too Hottie says, no anarchist society has ever increased its size to encompass an entire country. It's never happened. Marxist-Leninism, on the other hand, here's the thing. What do you mean by a country? A country is not a size. There are countries that are tiny. You know what the population of Luxembourg is? Let's see, with the population of Luxembourg, let's go take a look what the population of Luxembourg is. What is that? 680,000 to 690,000? That's smaller than Rojava. That's smaller than in the Spanish Civil War. So is that a country? Is that the size of a country or not? If we have millions of people and a region as well, larger than Luxembourg, have we not expanded to the size of a country? Or what you really mean is anarchists didn't create a state. So think about that. Why would anarchists create a state?
Right. The goalposts being set are absurd, right? Exactly, right? You wanted us to make a state, right? But also what we could look at is history. If we go back before, well, let's where would we want to go back? If we want to go, well, during the time of the Holy Roman Empire, if we want to go back to the time of the Holy Roman Empire, over here on Turtle Island, we have hundreds of thousands of different nations, right? Millions, if not billions of people who are practicing a kind of stateless or society building, right? If we look at the structures of early indigenous peoples, the way that they structured their society was largely communitarian, communist, or anarchist, right? And all of those existed long before most of the states that you know as states right now, right? A lot of the nations were still in their infancy at that point. Yeah, what is annoying to happen in our society is have people walking around believing that and being completely unchallenged. Yeah. Leftist aesthetic capitalism is as hard to achieve as leftism, to be, in my opinion. Yeah, leftist aesthetic capitalism, and it's, yeah, what are we even doing at that point, right? I mean, I've got that. There's some things that I want to say, but all of them are just emotional, speculative, and or unhelpful. So, I'll just move on. And go back to the video. Also, if I leave the mic on, does it cause what's it called? An echo?
We're trying to create power for the people. We're not trying to expand to millions of people and then give power to a bunch of government functionaries, which is all that Marxism-Leninism does. So what you just said is nonsense. It doesn't make any sense. What anarchists want to do is create regions of horizontality which expand and expand and expand. And sometimes those regions do reach the size of entire nations. However, what you really mean is that you think anarchists should be creating states for some reason, but that's nonsensical. Scotty Too Hottie, to be precise, anarchist Catalonia never expanded to encompass Spain entirely. It doesn't have to have a state. Why does it matter if it encompasses Spain entirely? Why is that relevant? If an anarchist movement started in Luxembourg and it took over all of Luxembourg, would that be a bigger success than them taking over a larger region with more people in Spain? Why does it matter? Why are you so obsessed with what states think about you? Why are you aping to get legitimacy from state structures? Why do the national boundaries of a country define your success as a movement? I thought that the workers had no nation. Why do you care so much about national boundaries? I thought that the whole point was we were trying to create worker power. My focus is on creating worker power. I don't give a shit if the worker power specifically claims the boundaries of the given nation. I care about how much success, how much movement towards the goal have they made. So this is just a very arbitrary requirement, which demonstrates a lack of understanding of how a horizontal revolutionary method actually works. The size is the thing, not whether it encompasses the national boundaries. Would you really expect any movement, say in the United States, to have success by completely claiming the entire North American continent? The United States is massive. This seems to me like a lack of understanding of material conditions. And like what you're doing is judging the success of the movement based on how it encompasses or doesn't encompass pre-established national boundaries, which really doesn't make any sense. The size, absolutely. Size is very important when it comes to a revolutionary movement. Why do we care about if that size corresponds directly to the boundaries of the nation? That's irrelevant. It's irrelevant.
Good. Yeah, that video was awesome. Anarch is always on point. Good takes there all around. And I think that the overall thing, Marxism-Leninism doesn't work, right? It doesn't, and it's not going to. It's detached from materiality. somehow, right? And that's, again, it's weird when ideologies take on a life of their own, and then that life of their own doesn't resemble at all where it came from. Because that's kind of how it feels with Marxist-Leninists. Generally. All right, that took us 2 hours to get through a 12-minute video. But it was good. And good conversations to be had. There was a lot of stuff in here that that gave us a lot of good, interesting things to talk about. Marxist-Leninism won't work by itself. Parts of it might help. No, absolutely. Well, and that's the thing. Like, if you take the Marxism out of it, and then you take the Leninism out of it, and you put those together, and you actually apply those philosophies to your material conditions, that would be a really fantastic idea. Really great idea. But it seems like Marxist-Leninists are more interested in following the footsteps of Stalin and Trotsky. Right? Right? And they're just justifying it. They are, it's just the veneer, right? It's the veneer of Marxism. It's the veneer of Leninism, but they are also just accelerationists who don't have a coherent strategy for how we get from here to there, other than, well, it's revolution, right? And whatever that means. And that's the thing, right? With that, the Marxist-Leninist approach, vanguardism. Vanguardism will never work because of COINTELPRO, right? It doesn't matter who is at the head of the vanguard. They will destroy that person, and your whole movement will die. As has happened over and over and over and over and over again, is if when you establish a vanguard and that vanguard starts to make headway into challenging the power of capital, and then capital just kills the vanguard, no more evolution. It's easy. It's fucking easy to kill one person. Or a handful. That approach will always, always, always not work. And who do we put at the head of the vanguard? Right? Even your heroes. Think about your heroes. Che Guevara slept with a 14-year-old when he was 29 years old. Married her later, actually. Martin Luther King had an affair with his wife, was historically, famously misogynist, and specifically went out of his way to avoid doing things that he should have that would have been better for the movement because he didn't want the CIA to leak details about his sordid affair. Right? Vanguardism is a failed endeavor. Always. Challenging capital directly is, I'm sorry, also always going to be a failure. And this is something that Marx talked about. Right? Marx talked at length. The Communist Manifesto, probably the largest section of the Communist Manifesto, is dedicated specifically to why it doesn't make sense for us to go to combat, go to war with capitalism. First, we need capitalism to develop the tools and technology and resources that help us feed people and help us develop sciences. Right? That doesn't mean that we prop up capitalism, but we don't want to sabotage the things that are feeding people and giving people health care and giving us scientific developments. We don't want to sabotage that. And any other efforts that we engage in that try to, capitalism has the money. They can buy the tanks. They will kill you. They will win. Those are the two strategies of Marxist-Leninism. They won't work. Sorry, I got a little excited there. Yeah, falling for the same mistakes. Exactly. China is doing this. They made their own version of ML, and people are like, it's not valid, but they are literally doing the same things the Soviets did. Well, and I wouldn't say that China's unsuccessful. And Cesar Chavez as well. Right. Thank you. Right. For as much as communists say read theory, I don't think that they read theory. Right. Right. It's the same thing that you get with Christians that clearly have never read the fucking Bible. Right. With Marxist-Leninists, I'm like, dude, have you read any of the literature? Any of the literature? But so with China, and I've intimated this before. I don't really want to beat it into the ground, but I do want to say that, like, well, this is just, it would just be the same conversation that we had about it last time, that there are no good guys and bad guys. On the world stage, in world history, if we zoom out and take a look objectively, there are no good guys and bad guys. I think that China is doing lots of really great things, right? Their homelessness is way better than most industrialized nations. Their universal health care, it's not bad. It's actually pretty good. It's one of the best healthcare systems in the world. They're the people are fed. They don't have a lot of starvation or hunger or a lot of precarity. Those are all fantastic things. But China isn't doing everything right. They are also engaging in empire. They are also empire building. They are engaging in building state capital systems, and they are investing in cementing those state capitalist institutions. So while I think that better is better than bad, I don't think that what China is doing is the right strategy. I don't think what they're building is a better tomorrow. I think that what they're building is a slightly better version of, better's not a good word, it's because it's ambiguous. Their youth unemployment is extremely high, unfortunately. Well, but that's right. That's a capitalist metric. Unemployment doesn't matter if you don't have to pay rent, if you don't have to pay for your health care, and if you don't have to pay for your access to food. Being unemployed isn't a problem. It's being unemployed is only a problem in a state of affairs where all of your basic needs are behind a paywall. States can never achieve socialism. Do you mean independent states can never achieve socialism in the way that they can only work toward it until there is some kind of global, there's no longer capitalism anywhere? Is that what you mean there, Jane? Um, I mean, states at all. Right. This is, oh, sorry about that. I'm not used to there being a microphone there. So this brings us back to the document that we were working on. Because let me pull it up. Because I was asking the same question on stream the other day. Is that gonna do it? Please, maybe is that gonna do it? Drat. Okay. No, I think that's the right one. No, that can't be the right one. Where is it? That's really weird. I've been having this problem with OBS being able to identify sources correctly. Wait. Wait a minute. No, that also didn't fix it. Okay, let me try something else then. I don't know what's going on there. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that, everybody. I don't know what's going on with all that. But I was asking this question on stream the other day because that's always been, for me, one of the things that I think is the big difference between communism and socialism, was I thought that the state was the primary difference. But what we reviewed was that, and this is me, right? That the conclusion that I came to was that a socialist structure doesn't necessarily have to be a state. It probably will, because we have states now. So any from here now to any kind of socialism that we can envision will also be a state socialism. Not that it would necessarily have to be, but that it probably would, is the conclusion that I came to. But in this is one of the things that I wanted to go and do more reading up on, to see what other people had said was some of the defining essential characteristics for socialism as delineated from communism. State must expropriate the means of production. Okay. Socialism is workers owning the means of production. Right. In any kind of capacity. Socialism is workers owning the means of production. The state must but not necessarily, Eleni, right? So, and that's that again. That's my thing. Probably, when Eleni is saying yes, but in order to do that, the state must expropriate the means of production, then distribute it among the people. Yes, probably, not necessarily. Is my thing on that. Because state socialism is state ownership. Right. That's state capitalism. When the state owns the means of production, that's state capitalism. Unless we are talking about an absolutely free society, which we're not. We're talking about some kind of state or some kind of democracy or some kinds of representative democracy, more likely. And in a representative democracy, any way that the state has ownership of the means of production is divorced from the people having the control of the means of production, even in a representative democracy. No, socialism is not necessarily a stateless society. For a short time it will. See, that's right. We are currently engaging in speculation. Right, and it's important for us to all keep in mind that we're engaging in speculation. So the state will always exist under socialism, but not own the companies. And then Eleni says, for a short time it will. Right, what we are engaging in is we are imagining what we think this might look like in the future. And so we should be a little bit wary about making strong claims about how things will necessarily be in a state of affairs that we're imagining, right? Socialism is whenever the workers own both own and control economic functions of society themselves, and not the state. And so that's the clarification that we would have to make, right? What kind of state? If we're talking about a representative democracy, again, the people don't have control, right? They don't own the means of production. If the workers have to go through their representative democracy to be able to affect their workplace, that's right. That's a bunch of extra steps. That's not actual freedom. That would be a kind of social democracy or democratic socialism. One of those two things, right? And there's some stuff to suss out between those two things, but it wouldn't be socialism. It would only be socialism if it was a pure democracy. Right? If it's a pure democracy where the government apparatus, the state, is a state that individuals can gain access to the levers of power to change their material conditions. Because if we don't have that, where the worker can actually access those levers of power themselves to change their direct material conditions, we don't have socialism. What we have is some other kind of state, and that state is functioning either to perpetuate capitalism or to perpetuate a democratic socialist state, where that state maintains its importance because it won't give up the levers of control to the actual people itself. Support moving towards socialism and communism with the dictatorship of the proletariat if there's an off-ramp. All right. The workers would have to direct democracy of the means of production in order to achieve socialism. Well, and I think that I could concede in a kind of soft socialism that is akin to what Richard Wolff describes. So a big fan of Richard Wolff in general, not a big fan of Richard Wolff's solution for how we achieve socialism and how we achieve what does he call it? Workplace democracy, I think is his philosophy. But I would concede to that kind of state of affairs. In Richard Wolff's conception, all workplaces are their own democratic apparatus that is a direct democracy apparatus, wherein every employee in the company has access to the levers of control to change the direction or the laws or the rules or the policies of the company. That workers have direct control over their working conditions, right? And that would be a kind of maybe soft socialism where we wouldn't have access to all of our needs, right? The working class would have seized some of the means of production, but would not have seized all of the means of production. If that might make sense. And I'm just, this is me coming up with something I've never thought of before, right? I've never really thought about, I've always just thought that Richard Wolff's idea of democratic workplaces was good in theory, but when it came to actually putting it into practice, isn't going to be an avenue that gives us socialism or communism or anarchism. So it was something that I wasn't that interested or invested in. But now that I'm thinking about the possibility of moving to a soft socialism first, maybe not a bad thing. And in going back to something that Eleni has driven home over and over and over again, achieving slightly better material conditions is still a bit of a W, right? That's, even if it's not going to be the right path to get us to where we want to go, that utopian direction, if we can come up with a tomorrow that's slightly better for people's material conditions, that's still kind of a W. Definitions are important, in my opinion. Yes, me too. Oh, there's a lot of stuff. Eleni, what Eleni says is, I think people just think socialism has to be communism to be socialism. But like, if that's the case, then why even use the word socialism ever? I completely get you. I totally sympathize with that. In fact, that's in my last stream. That was the thing that I was like, what the fuck is the difference? What is the difference? And I like this conception, right, where we think of communism as a decommodified in global socialism. And a socialism is whenever people in a place have direct access to the levers of power. The worker, right. The workers would have to do direct democracy of the means of production in order to achieve socialism, right? I think people just, right, read that. Communism is fully demodified. Yeah, right. That like Jane just said in chat. That wouldn't be a state, though. And again, that brings me back to, it seems to me that the biggest difference when people are talking about socialism versus communism, it seems to me that most people think that the state is the big difference, right? In communism, stateless, classless, moneyless society. In socialism, we would still have classes, we would still have money, possibly, and we would still have the state. but it's entirely possible for a socialism to not have a state and money and classes, or a state, no money, and classes, right? We can think of this in any kind of combination, in any permutation. We can think of this in any permutation, that socialism might be without some or all of those things, necessarily. So the thing I learned was you can be like on the way to communism, but not be communism until it's achieved everywhere. But that's a Lenin thing, right? That's until capitalism exists nowhere, communism, right? Is that, I can't remember the quote. As long as capitalism exists anywhere, communism can exist nowhere, I think is the quote. And if not, that I can pull up the book. I got the book right there. It's in the first paragraph of the State and Revolution. Yeah, definitions are important because we can't stop until we actually get there. If we say something is socialism and it falls short, whatever we get will be short. So socialism is what we describe ourselves being in until we reach in some conception. Matt, I think that's kind of what you mean there. We can unravel means of production a little. Let's say you make solar panels in a co-op, but you need to import raw materials. Is that owning the means? So, good question, Dark Ray Otter. It would. It would if you were in a free association with other people who were in free association with their own organization, and those people are supplying you the product that you need to manufacture your solar panels. So, yes. But in so much, right, if that person who's making the solar panels is in a nation and they have to get, that is a socialist nation, but they have to get their raw materials from another nation that's not, they would have to pay money for it. So, that's one way that they would be alienated from having complete democratic control over their means of production. I think that that's correct and not incorrect. If that's incorrect, somebody please tell me. Let's say you have the means of production is basically the economic functions of society. Right, could be to some degree, and like I said, there might be degrees of soft and control, or soft and hard. There might be what's the word? On a spectrum. That might be on a spectrum, or maybe not. Really depends. It depends. I'm not in a position to make any firm decisions on anything right now. Socialism allows for commodification. The difference between what we currently have is who benefits. If we have commodification, though, then we necessarily have alienation, Matt. This might be very, very insightful. Socialism. I'm actually going to pull this aside and put this on the notes over here. And if we have alienation, then the workers don't have unfettered access to the means of production. I think is what I would like to say about that. That if we have any kind of commodification, then we necessarily still have alienation. If we necessarily still have alienation, then workers do not have direct access to the means of production. But, hold on, we get caught up with chat. The state is completely unnecessary, in my opinion. We can have a state, we can not have a state. In both of the organizations, either socialism, well, and not communism, obviously, but in socialism, I think. Going to exist under a dictatorship of the proletariat, just like people eventually see no reason to call it state anymore. And it might be the case that what we achieve is that we have created a new state of affairs that we think of as state, that isn't the same as the state of affairs that we call state currently. That's something that I'll entertain for sure, absolutely. Because there's lots of, we've talked about many of the different definitions of the state. We may need to have that conversation. Pretty sure as long as raw materials are sourced from someone that owns their means of production, it falls within socialism. Right, exactly. As long as I'm doing free association and the others that I depend on for my materials or my machines or my land, whatever it is that I need to depend on others for, as long as those other peoples are also in free associations, I think that absolutely translates. There's no such thing as decentralized state. Right, there is no such thing as a decentralized state. In the current conception of state that we have, right, and that I think is a very important aspect. What you're referring to might more accurately be called a confederation or a federation, right? I don't think there's much difference in federation or confederation, but rather than it being a state, which is one, because that's an affiliation of groups who are organized together and affiliated, but are independent, autonomous agents of their own. Yeah, that's what Soviet means. Okay, right. That's a word I haven't thought about. Or confederation. Jane has already said it. What am I even doing here? Y'all don't even need me. Confederation or directly democratic councils would be another. Right, okay. Commodification, noun, the assignment of a commercial value to something previously valueless. Right. Of commercial value, of exchange value. Because exchange value doesn't matter for our markets. If we are trying to conceive of free, unfettered markets, all of the usual things that we think of as market constraints no longer matter, right? We don't care about supply and demand. We don't care about commercial value. We don't care about what's the other surplus value. We don't care about what's the other kind of value, use value, right? That's the only thing that matters. The only thing that matters is use value. Who needs what for what, when, where, right? And then we do that. Because if we with commodification, I might have to deal with this because this is not the definition of commodification that I was working with. But I can't wait any longer. I have to go to the bathroom. So I'm gonna pull up a song. Because I can't wait any longer. That's got to happen now. Let's see if it's still here. I saw it earlier. Oh, it was oh, come on. There we go. I'm going to leave you all with a song. I'm going to use the restroom and be right back. I think this will give me enough time.
The company store, the paradigm of absolute control. And that's why we're just out here doing simple things, pointing out that we're meant to be in nature and be natural. And this is where we find the source that God made to transcend the New World Order. And that's why they want to try to keep us out of it.
I'm angry. I've had enough of these people. They're a bunch of Christian murderers, scum. They're on giant death factories keeping babies alive. They're selling their body parts. What more do you need to know about these people? I go out and face these scum. They literally crawl out from under rocks. They have green looking skin and they run around screaming, we love Satan, we wanna eat babies. I have them on video. Hillary's in the creepy, weird, sick stuff, man. She sleeps in the same room with that creepy, weird woman whose mother wears a hood over her head. What the hell? That woman number one is ugly. Imagine how bad she smells, man. I'm told her and Obama just stink. Obama and Hillary both smell like sulfur. Literal vampire pot belly goblins are hobbling round coming after us. My spirit gets close to that evil and I feel it go. We're such self-centered crap. We don't even notice hell itself rising up against us. Millions of pointed people of the very worst type, and I'm so pissed. We're gonna stab your daughter at the mall. We're gonna stab your wife, your son. We're gonna stab you with a butcher knife, and then the police chief is gonna say, we love our Somalis, we love our Muslims. Oh, they're so good, oh, they're so sweet.
I was watching Fox News as I worked out this morning.
Nick Lusko, everyone. Bringing us bangers since way back in the day. Right, and has long been a weirdo. I was going to say always, but long, I don't know if always, but is such a fucking weirdo. Absolutely. Okay, so, let's get me caught up on chat a little bit. Okay, person chops trees and sells logs, they have commodified a tree. Yes. If a person chops trees and sells logs, they have commodified a tree. That is true. Yes, because they sell it, which means that there must be a market, therefore there must be market value. Others' value of that person's work is a commodification. And so the reason why there's necessarily alienation there is because, right, is because there's a degree of separation. The person who gets the log doesn't have to have any kind of meaningful relationship with the person who cuts and makes the log. And how this person values that log, that work, that effort, that labor doesn't have anything to do with the work and labor that the laborer has done to put the tree in the market, on the market, that the person purchasing the trees, right? So there's this alienation where Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thank you for the heads up. Shit, where was I going with that? But let me get caught up with chat. And then we'll come back to the chopping trees. Because I think that's a pretty good example. Councils that are controlled with direct democracy would not be a state. Yes. Right. And that's my, and I think that what Eleni is saying is that they would see councils that are controlled through democracies who are working together would see that as state. You and I wouldn't, right? This is where it's important for us to hammer some of this stuff out and get to the nuance and get to what people actually mean. Oh no, it's okay. Benefits to both decentralization and centralization. Yes, I will agree with that. There are benefits, pros and cons to both centralization and decentralization. When it comes to certain kinds of things, farming, I think, is a perfect example. Farming should only be decentralized. The more that we centralize farming, the more precarious our crops are, the more damage we do to the soils, and the less efficiently that farm can provide resources for all of the people who need the resources. Decentralized farming, where food is grown near where people are going to consume that food, is a more efficient approach. But when it comes to the aggregation of energy, right? Or if it comes to, there are some things that we would want more centralized, or we would not want to decentralize too much. I'll see that for sure. Supply and demand will be used in a different sense, not as a method of exploit, but to plan. Logistics will need to conceptualize supply and demand to avoid waste. Right. And we're still talking about the cutting the trees and the logs here, Matt, right? I do like that kitchen example, Dark Gray Otter. That's actually a really, really great example. Right. Huh. I looked it up on Google. There's a place called Senegambia. It was a confederation, but also a state. Interesting. And that's the thing. So when we're talking about freedom, right, in general, and building societies in a free way, when we're talking about that, you can't doesn't really make sense in that. And so for anyone to say, well, you can't be a state, right? If a group of independent organizations decides to come together in some kind of confederation and call itself a state, well, that's cool, right? Right, and that's decentralized planning is also good. And that's going back to the vanguard, right? The vanguard argument for revolution versus the opposite of that, right? Building pockets of flat structure power that can give individuals little pockets of freedom so that those individuals can empower themselves and pick up whatever means that they need to dismantle the system and engage in revolution. That's a winning strategy. And that is decentralizing power. That's decentralizing planning. So I'm trying to think of the group. Well, that's a tangent. I can't think of the details, so I'm not going to muddle through half-assed remembered thing. So I'm still playing with this this idea of commodification. Because okay, let's think about this. If we are, what brought us here? Right, commodification, noun, the assignment of commercial value to something previously valueless. Right, so what you're talking about is a reinvention of the commercial value. It wouldn't be commercial now. It would be use value depending on what you were going with here. Right, logistics. Right, logistics would need to conceptualize supply and demand to avoid waste. Right. And I need to think about some words before I put them out there. The thought that Mensheviks could be socialists, but I don't know then. What? I'd have to think an awful lot more about that. It's been an awful long time since I've dug into the history of the Bolsheviks and Mensheviks. But I'm really still caught up about this. Okay, so the thing that's tripping me out. First off, I don't know why this keeps resizing itself. Stop. The thing that's tripping me out. Commodification. What is it? What is it, brain? What are you trying to get me to get to? Something is cooking, but I don't even know what's cooking. Oh, and my brain hurts. And I've been streaming for more than 2 hours. That might be part of why I'm having such. I've been streaming for almost 3 hours now. Goodness, 2.5. Okay, so my brain isn't working anymore. I keep trying to get the gears to turn, and nothing. It's just spinning. I think this is a pretty good place to cap this conversation now. And we've talked about a whole lot of stuff that I would like to mull over and think about. So, let's call it here. Friday's stream will probably also be later in the day. didn't seem like it was difficult for anybody to adjust to the time change. Good to see you all here. Glad to have you all today. This was a fantastic conversation, and I feel like I've learned a whole lot again, and thought a whole lot more about some of this stuff than. So let's find a raid target, and yeah, I will remember next stream when I watch SVOD. Yeah. Oh yeah, it keeps doing this yet again. So let's see who we got. That would be a fun one. And we like... Yeah, we like the Noisy Immigrant. It's Noisy's birthday? Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know that. But they're doing war coverage, and that's awesome. So let's hop over and do some war coverage with Noisy, and wish them a happy birthday. That's good. Go give some love to our comrade. Why is it not doing the thing? There you go. All right, that's our yeah, this was a tough brain workout, and my brain is just really exhausted. Like I said, just nothing but spinning gears up here. So we'll pick this up. Thank you all for the amazing conversation, for all of the awesome feedback, for pressing in on these ideas. I can't thank you enough for challenging the concepts and ideas, and being able to push back on each other, and then you get the clarification, and then we all just move on and nobody's feelings are hurt. You all are just amazing humans. So thank you for being here and spending your time with me, helping me learn and grow too. I just appreciate the heck out of it. So, oh, that's a good one. That's a good. I think that's a good happy birthday message. All right. So, let's hop